But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the house barah, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
You can put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. How's everybody doing, chat, as we get started on this latest episode of the Last JabroniCon? I took last night off for my birthday, which was absolutely lovely, and thanks for the birthday wishes that I got for quite a few people. I am, on the occasion of my birthday, working on a new crowdfunded translation fundraising goal because I finished the last one. The new translation is up. I'll be dropping a link in chat where you can find it. Right now, I am on $100 out of my $1,500 birthday month fundraising goal to cover the next 3 Punto Final translations. All contributions are beautiful, and I'm about to drop a link in chat where anyone who feels so inclined can make a contribution if they'd like to. You can find the finished translations, including the most recent one, right here. And episode 2 of the Punto Final podcast is now up for $3 and up patrons. And if you're not one and you would like to hear the Punto Final podcast, I've got some news for you in just a second. Let me just drop that link in chat for where you can find it, because here's the thing. A friend of mine accidentally bought 20 $10 1-month gift subscriptions to my Patreon. And most of them, as far as I can tell, are still available. So if you want to redeem one of those, which will, amongst other things, give you access to the Punto Final podcast, you can redeem a gift subscription right there. So, how's everybody doing, chat? Hope you didn't miss me too much last night. So, I had noticed that apparently Natalie ContraPoints has decided that she really has not had enough of it. And so she decided to go for an absolute car crash of a debate on Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast. And let me just say up front, I'm not particularly impressed with Brianna Joy Gray. Ever since a couple of years ago, she had Talia Levin, I think it was, on. They were talking about, like, working with Nazis. Talia Levin was saying quite reasonably that given how few of them can actually be reached and how much time and effort it requires in order to, like, de-radicalize a fascist, the effort really ought to be spent someplace else. There really isn't a whole lot of benefit to be had from it. And Brianna Joy Gray was like, why would you de-radicalize them? Like, she was just willing to... her idea was just working with Nazis, basically. And true to that, she's apparently recently just had fucking Jimmy Dore on. So very much on the Red-Brown Alliance scale of things. But anyway, so not actually all that impressed with her. But anyway, she had a debate with ContraPoints, and ContraPoints had a good old crash out afterwards. And so I thought, let's have a look at it. The title is called "The Left Only Wants to, quote, endlessly critique power, question mark, with ContraPoints." So let's see. I've heard that this is actually quite excruciating.
Is there something else that I'm missing here that's your critique of the left?
My frustration with the left is more that when it comes time for the
Okay, here we go.
Actually elect. The energy is so oppositional.
Let's talk about
Actions,
leverage.
Yeah. Okay.
Do I have more leverage against Kamala Harris before she's elected or once she's president for 4 years?
Reasonable question.
Protest voter.
I mean, I would say it all fucking depends on what you're doing, but I mean, it is a question you actually do have to answer if your strategy is entirely elect Democrats, which kind of hers is. But, okay, we're gonna skip the clips. We're gonna actually... This is long. This is 3 hours. This ContraPoints debate is longer than a ContraPoints video. But okay.
An anarchist book. I'm not an anarchist.
Turn bread tube, why is that?
Well, I had never thought it made any sense. Like, I mean...
I didn't either, I will have to say. I had always kind of wondered. I mean, that's the thing about BreadTube as well. I mean, it is fundamentally just a subreddit. And so people kind of populate the term BreadTube with whoever they want. And Caleb Maupin has just sort of made up his own weird-ass list of people. But so, yeah.
The phrase BreadTube is a reference to the conquest of bread, an anarchist book. I'm not an anarchist.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, exactly. This is precisely why this does not make a huge amount of sense.
I don't know why this, like, framing has been imposed on, but, you know, it is what it is. You don't get to choose these things.
How do you identify politically?
I am kind of curious about this.
I identify as, like, a left liberal at this stage, is how I would describe myself.
Like, okay, so what the hell is that?
I would say that I'm aligned with, like, the left wing of the Democratic Party. Like, AOC kind of politics.
Wait. Like, what does that even mean? Because there's what she said she was going to do before she won her first primary, or there's what she's done in office. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, AOC, at least at one
Like,
point...
are we talking about when she lied about working tirelessly for a ceasefire?
in her life, self-described as a socialist or a democratic socialist, at
That's
least,
right.
did she not?
Yes, that's right.
Would you define yourself that way as well?
I think I would at one time also have. I think now I would say I'm probably more of a social democrat.
I mean, that's basically the same thing. Like, when you hear Dem socks in this country, they're, and you listen to what they actually are proposing, it is just, they're sock Dems.
For me, my attitude towards politics is very not, well, it's very non-philosophical in a way, because I feel that I react to the situation that I'm in. So I think that, you know, am I a social democrat in the sense that I think capitalism is like this amazing system? Like, no, not really. I just think that social democracy is like the most plausible path to improving what we have.
This is, which, see, here's the thing. I mean, which is, it's really interesting for her to say that she's not philosophical about it. Because the thing is, this is precisely the sort of thing you really ought to have a few deep thoughts on, because if there are things that you want to see happen in the world, you know, politically, having some theory of how that works, how you go about it, some sense of how change happens and all that sort of thing, you have to have some, otherwise you're just floundering.
If I like found myself in, I don't know, a Stalinist country, I probably would not be advocating capitalist revolution. I would be advocating, like, you know, well, I don't know, some kind of, like, dangest reforms or something.
Wait, okay, so if she found herself in a Stalinist country, I mean, I'm assuming that what she means by this is, like, some sort of very top-down state claiming to be, you know, at least claiming to be socialist, with some sort of cult of personality at its top, and what she'd be calling for is not an end to that, but that it should have more capitalism in it. Like, keep the cult of personality, keep the centralization of power at the top, but more capitalism? That is a wild fucking take.
So, I mean, from my perspective, you know, someone who's obviously...
And Chad, let me know if I need to make any adjustments to the volume, of course.
Been a witness to some of the backlash and at least your career over the last 5 or 6 years when I've been more plugged into the online left. It does feel sometimes like some of the pushback you get is because there's a gap in your perceived sort of identification or self-identification, at least at one point, in some of the political stances that you take maybe in a post-2020 world. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah,
I mean, I have to say, like, considering how hard she crashed out after this, like, this is a very gentle start to this. Like, these are, I mean, as I said, not a fan of Brianna Joy Gray by any stretch of the imagination, but, like, anyone who wanted to have an interview would have to have these questions in there. They just make sense. They set the stage. I mean, totally reasonable things to ask.
There is like a definite proportion of the backlash that I received that's based on a kind of misreading of me as being sort of having always been more radical than I really was.
And I think she's right there. I think that a lot of people actually thought, or at least hoped, that she was more radical than she really was. Including, apparently, a lot of her fans.
I mean, I think that part of it is like the aesthetic of what because I started out doing, I'm like this like transgender YouTuber who is making videos about how fascism is bad. This is very like communist coded behavior.
Yeah.
At least in like internet culture, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think just in internet culture. I mean, there is kind of a history there. Certainly, fascists would also tend to consider opposition to them communist coded behavior, literally even when it comes from libs.
Like, if you're a trans person on the internet, you're complaining about Nazis all day, you're probably a communist.
You would hope. And it warms the heart every time it turns out to be true.
Right, and that's true. You are probably a communist, to be fit that description. I mean, I think that I kind of did have a more... So, I mean, I used to be quite centrist in that, like, in 2016, I think I was like a Hillary Clinton supporter.
Okay, this is actually... We actually watched her say all of this in the debate with the mosquito guy, Citronella, Joseph Citarella. Or not debate, like, fucking... mutual sycophantathon.
Politically viable route.
Well, I think part of it is in 2020,
a more centrist healthcare about your approach. I think the question people have is, once this lesson was learned in 2016, that who we were told was electable wasn't who was actually electable, and that there was this appetite in the country for somebody that was more radical, that was more anti-establishment in the form of Donald Trump.
Okay, this is already a weird way to put this. Because first of all, okay, maybe some people... I would imagine actually a lot of people kind of awakened to the idea that actually, center-right politics was not... did not have the broad appeal that it's often represented as having. But that wasn't a new thing in 2016. I talk about this a lot, but you can go back to the polling in the 90s. And you find consistently, the majority of the population are well to the left of the political class on all sorts of issues, like healthcare, for example, or war, and whether the U.S. should constantly be starting them. Things like that. There are occasional polls where people are asked, do you think there should be an alternative in the elections other than the Democrats and the Republicans, or do you feel you're well represented by the current options? And majorities say, yeah, we think we should have more options. Like, have you looked at them? Phrasing the election of Donald Trump, which was very much by default, especially that time, that in 2016, it was entirely the Electoral College. If this had been done in a normal, even superficially democratic way, then Hillary Clinton had 3 billion more votes and would have gotten the office. It's just that in the US, there's this whole participation trophy system with the Electoral College, so the loser sometimes gets in anyway. So you can't really look at this as proof of some sort of massive support for Trump as some sort of massive anti-establishment energy. If anything, the lack of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton, for example, is much better proof of that. Because if you look at the people who actually support Trump, they're not really anti-establishment in any meaningful sense. Even allowing for just how fucking malleable the term anti-establishment even is.
That there was this phenomenon of the Bernie to Trump voter where those same Trump voters would have been interested in someone like Bernie Sanders, who didn't just, talk about healthcare the way that Obama did, but did so in a much more radical way. In a way
more radical. Single payer is not fucking radical. Single payer is not what would be radical would be just straight up socialized medicine. Just nationalize the entire system, get rid of the private sector totally, bring the pharmaceuticals companies and all of it under one roof so that there aren't these outside capitalist interests controlling everything. That would be kind of radical. Single payer is not radical. It isn't even an unpopular position, I should note. Lots of liberals are for single payer. In fact, the majority of the population has been for single payer for a very long time.
That was thought to be somehow alienating to the public, but which was in fact populist.
Again, see, thought to be is doing a lot of work here. Because anyone who was looking at the polls was totally unsurprised that people heard somebody saying, why don't we get the insurance companies off your back and you could just get healthcare when you need it, and people liked the idea. Anyone who was paying attention to the polling over the years was unsurprised by that, because that's the majority position. And the people who pretend that it makes you unelectable, the right-wing Democratic consultants, the political consultants, that whole fucking punditry, all of those people, either they do not bother to actually engage with the available evidence on public opinion, or they know perfectly well that what they're saying is nonsense. Ooh, we have link spam. Fuck off, link spam. Goodbye. So,
if that lesson was learned in 2016, I guess the question people have is what caused you to switch?
Learn by who, though? The passive voice really is doing a lot of work here. Learn by the Democratic Party? Learn by the DNC? Learn by the general public? Learn by who exactly? I would say, most likely, on a certain level, probably learn by a lot of the general public who were not aware of it, because there is absolutely no real media representation, certainly pre-2016, of the majority view that insurance companies suck and we'd like to be able to get healthcare without having to deal with them.
Move back to this idea that a more centrist pragmatism or incrementalism was going to be a more electable and politically viable route.
Well, I think part of it is, in 2020, I supported Bernie Sanders in the primary.
I remember.
And
we talked about it on the show, I think.
Oh, maybe did. Okay, so it hasn't been 10 years. Okay, but yeah, Biden won fairly decisively.
No, he didn't really. Not if you're serious about it. I mean, yes, within the context of the absolute joke that is U.S. U.S. presidential primaries, yeah, he did. But if you actually look at the time when the primary was competitive, Bernie Sanders was way out on top. Obama actually had to intervene and get the runners-up, since Joe Biden was way towards the bottom. The only people below him were in the single digits or not even a full percentage point. 3 people had to, 2 or 3 had to actually collapse their votes together and hand them to Biden in order to give him even a slight edge over Sanders. If you didn't have that factor, which is, if it were not possible to do this sort of just overt manipulation in the primary, Sanders would have just walked away with it.
Both on the primary and the general election, which seemed like a kind of step back from the edge to me.
Wait, Sanders is the edge? The edge of what?
So, I think that kind of pushed me in a more moderate direction, also as a result of
Wait, okay, so she just sort of sways with whoever wins in a primary? I mean, let's remember as well that Biden actually had to, in order to kind of smooth things over with the voters who were, once again, not feeling all that great about ending up with a guy that nobody really wanted, who was not actually particularly popular, who kept on talking about how he had no empathy with, people who were drowning under student loans, and that it pissed him off that people wanted health care, and nothing will fundamentally change. That was not the popular preference. It was what people got stuck with. So to change your political leanings based on the fact that that guy wins a primary, given just what an absolute joke the primary are, that means you just don't stand for anything.
I think clashing with people who were abstainers, I felt that, because I've always seen Donald Trump as, very menacing, as, a nightmarish presence in American politics, who I am, willing to resist by any means necessary, essentially.
Define any means, though. Those are load-bearing words.
And so I think that I got frustrated with the opposition to voting for Biden, and then in 2024, I think my frustration increased, and I feel like now.
Wait, so her frustration. What she's saying here sounds a lot like she outsources her political viewpoint to the DNC.
Yeah, I see the second Trump administration as being even worse than the first, which I thought it would be.
It certainly is, but if your bellwether is the DNC, then they're not talking about resisting by any means necessary, or any means.
So, I feel fairly disillusioned with any kind of larger ideological project. I guess we could probably spend all day litigating why exactly Kamala Harris lost in 2020.
It's not actually hard to put your finger on it. She wasn't popular to begin with. Nobody really wanted her. She has never even won her own home state in a primary, because the only primary she ever participated in, she dropped out of before they voted in her home state. And then she was genocidal.
For by the margins that she did. But the way I diagnose it is largely that voters moved to the right.
No, they didn't.
So this has me feeling
this is the sort of thinking that only makes sense if you don't pay any attention to abstention. If you just assume that everybody is either just voting for Democrats or they're voting for Republicans, and if you don't vote for Democrats, you're voting for Republicans and you must support them. Yeah, I mean, which is not a viewpoint that will survive even a second looking at the actual figures on electoral participation and what people had to say about it and all this. I mean, this is just wild. So she thinks that because roughly 1 in 5 people voted for Trump, that means that everybody moved to the right?
The way that...
Then why is there such unprecedented resistance? I mean, not absolutely unprecedented, but certainly on levels that we haven't seen in a long time.
Liberals felt, around in like 1991 or whatever, when you had like almost 12 years of like Reaganism at that point, and it's just like, well, my sense of... so there's a reason why I'm not like a Democratic Party press person, right? Because my messaging is not inspiring.
No, I mean, you got that right. And she doesn't, I mean, the thing that is really wild about this, she comes off as not really standing for anything. Like, why do you have to move just because a primary comes out one way or another? Why does that have to change your view of what's right? It might change your view of what you might be able to actually achieve in the near future or whatever, given certain facts that are revealed by that sort of outcome. But why is that going to change your view of what should happen? Those are two very different things. I would think that somebody whose whole thing is philosophy would understand that there's a lot of distance between is and should.
At all. Like, I'm aware of this. And, like, to be clear, no politician should say the things that I'm saying.
I would agree. No,
because they're not inspiring.
They aren't.
But that's why I'm not a politician, right?
Hey, Riveroon. I wanted to get sort of an overview of this because it's so long. So the Vanguard showed up on my Rex with sort of a summary of the thing. So I looked at a little bit of that before I went on, and they were talking about how when she does not have a script and production values and everything, she has zero riz, and fuck, that's true. Like, does she stand for anything?
Because I don't...
Like, the Democrats decided to move way right on trans rights. Like, right to the right of where they were in 2015. To the right of where they were when North Carolina had that bathroom bill, like, a decade or more ago, and the entire, like, everyone who was anyone who wanted to be seen as decent by the majority of the population boycotted North Carolina, and lots of Republicans immediately said, no, we want nothing to do with this is horrible, it's divisive, it's hateful, etc. And there has been a concern. So if we're just going based on what you think is electable, based on what the DNC does that mean that you as a trans woman feel that you should have different rights than you felt you should have 10 years ago? Like, is there a stance anywhere in this?
Have an inspiring message, and you need, like, I mean, I feel
well,
like...
I mean, let's face it, they don't have an inspiring message. Yeah, like, why, of all the things you could be in the creator space, in the YouTube and TikTok and whatever, Instagram space, she decided to be like a political creator, somebody who did stuff on politically significant topics. Why? Like, most of the people who do that, who aren't just paid by some large entity to just put out PR or whatever, most people are doing that because there's something they believe in and they want to say it. Like, I'm not doing this because it gets me the fucking endorsement deals, because, like, it fucking doesn't. I'm doing this because I believe in it, and it's a way of, reaching people, and also forming a certain amount of social connection, or at least parasocial connection, in a context where that is very difficult. But, you know, I talk about this stuff not because it's going to win me any friends in high places or whatever, but because I fucking believe in it. And I think most of the people who do this kind of creating, you know, whether they have better production values than me or not, are doing it because at bottom they believe in what they're doing. I even think on a certain level, even a grifter like Caleb Maupin is doing it out of some level of conviction. Fucked up convictions in his case, but conviction nonetheless. She doesn't seem to have any fucking convictions.
The politicians that I've seen in my life who have the best messaging are people like Barack Obama and like Zoran Mamdani, who both have this kind of like radiant energy of hope.
Yeah, except, I mean, and let me say, plenty of criticisms of Mamdani, but I would say in terms of messaging, they actually are very different figures. Because Obama's whole thing was a blank slate. He would say things that he knew that people would be able to just project whatever they wanted on them, and then he would avoid ever saying anything to disabuse them of that notion as long as the campaign was going on. You know, Mamdani actually has taken some stands and then, like, replaced them several times. But, the inspiration that came from his campaign is that he was actually specifically saying, out of at least apparent conviction, these are things that really need to happen. These are things that I intend to do if given the chance. And people believed in those things, and because they believed that they would make their lives better. It was consistent with the way they felt the world should work. Obama never did that. He just said, like, hope, change, and you could just write, it was a blank slate. So that is such a weird combination there.
That is, you know...
And yes, I know that Mamdani was very recently helping to rehabilitate the image of Obama in that, like, primary school classroom. They were reading a story together about his school bus, which was ironic because of the large number of school children that Obama murdered.
It's more than any specific policy idea. It's the kind of vibes.
Vibes. Like, the reason that somebody like Mamdani got the level of support that he got is not because of vibes. It was because people, at the very least, thought that there was some substance there. And there was substance that they like. Because 90% of what we get in politics in this country, and not just in this country, you see this other places too, it has spread throughout the world, is just people saying things like, I come from a place called hope. Yeah, that was Bill Clinton. I do really great impressions. And, you know, we're gonna get things done. And all this stuff that doesn't mean shit. So when somebody gets up there and says, yeah, Israel's committing genocide, and as mayor, I'm not going to have my office be in any way complicit in that, that is substance. That is, here's a thing that is obviously right, and I commit to do that thing. That is what actually, where the excitement comes in. I mean, that was the same thing, like, with Sanders, and Sanders is, again, a really overrated person, and the spin-offs that have come from him, which includes Breonna Joy Gray, have also been deeply overrated. But what people were responding to was that there was actually substance.
They have. I do not possess this quality at all.
Okay. But that phrase, like, almost more than any specific policy idea, I think that's where the rub comes in, and where I see the frustration that some of the left articulates toward you, not just you, but anybody who takes a more, who believes authentically that a more moderate position is the more electable sort of smarter, politically advantageous one. Because many of us look at Romney, and even Barack Obama in 2008, and I would also say Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, and say that he was able to, these people were all able to snatch movements out of nowhere, right?
No, they really weren't. I mean, it's not surprising, again, that a former Sanders staffer would see it that way. Because people whose like political experience comes from, being the retainers of candidates generally do not have much of a view of grassroots politics. But the thing is that Sanders did not create a movement. The movement was there. Like, even what launched Sanders into beginning to become sort of a national household name was Occupy Wall Street. He didn't do Occupy Wall Street, but he heard all this language about the 1% and stuff like that, and he started putting it in his speeches, and people started sharing that shit on Facebook and Twitter and whatever. And that is why Sanders became a thing at all. Before that, nobody had really heard of the man. This idea that the politicians are the ones creating the movement rather than that they are responding to it. Same with Mamdani. Like, he didn't create the movement. He turned it into an election campaign. Like, the movement was already there. New York was full of people who have been willing to put it on the line and get their asses kicked by the cops and go to jail fighting against the genocide in Palestine. And what he did was say, hey, all you people who are in New York opposing the genocide in Palestine, I'm one of you, and I want to be your mayor. And he had enough of a platform that enough people heard it, and that became a thing. It wasn't snatching a movement out of nowhere. It was redirecting a movement into an election campaign. That is very much not the same thing.
Obama was not the likely choice. Senator Sanders didn't even seem to even believe his own campaign was going to have legs when he...
Well, because his whole thing is to convince people to vote for Democrats and then go off into the sunset. He is not in these things to win them.
Launched in the middle of the grass with 3 cameras around in 2016, and obviously Zohran Mamdani was polling in single digits in a long shot, at least when I interviewed him last February. But I would argue that what propelled all of those individuals into the limelight was not their moderation, but that they stood out among a crowd of moderates who were...
I mean, she's not wrong here. I totally, credit where credit is due. That's the thing. Anytime somebody stands out and looks like an alternative to this fucking unsalted porridge that is the rest of political discourse, like official political discourse in the U.S., if enough people see them, that will be a thing, because it's like, holy shit, this actually sounds like it might be something fresh on the menu. We haven't had that in years. And that's precisely why beating down any side of an alternative is so important. Like, the reason there's all this freak out amongst Democrats about the groups and purity tests and all this shit is that enough people whose votes they rely on have started to feel that they are entitled to have standards and have things that they actually care about and desperately need, and they're saying they aren't going to support somebody for office if they're not getting those things. And that is freaking out the Democrats because their donors hate all of the things that the voters want. And they can either piss off the voters or they can piss off the donors, so they have to do this incel thing where it's like, blaming voters for having standards. Like, nobody wants to go out with... Well, nobody wants to vote for nice guys. It's...
unwilling to make true criticisms about their own party and the other side, and the ways in which they are often aligned along...
I mean, Sanders, it's worth noting, notoriously avoids making serious criticisms of his own party. which he pretends is not his own party. He is technically an independent, except not really.
Because of their shared corporate donors, and maintaining substantially the status quo. And so that, to me, is what so many of us learned from 2016 and what Bernie's greatest sort of gift and contribution to the political space was. That calling out corporate elites, calling out the Epstein class, calling out super PAC donors, calling out the military-industrial complex is not something that will get you marginalized and sidelined.
He does not call out the military-industrial complex. Are you kidding me? Sanders is a big boaster of the fucking F-35. He is a supporter of the military-industrial complex. He wasn't calling that out, like Mamdani, I suppose, probably was. But Sanders sure as hell wasn't.
But in fact will earn the trust of the public at large. What do you say to that argument? That in fact, the people that you were sort of characterizing as successful because of their, the person, I don't want to mischaracterize, you put words in your mouth, but charisma, personality, intangible.
Inspiration. I think the word she used was inspiring.
In fact, are popular because it is message driven, it's policy driven.
Well, it's definitely a combination. Like, I don't think you can have any policy and win based on vibes. And I agree with what you're saying about populism is very in at the moment, right? And I do think that type of messaging.
But what do you mean by that? You don't see it really in the political class for the most part.
Could succeed. I mean,
and also, just this. Could we just kill the word populism? All it does is help people avoid having serious discussions about what they actually mean.
The place to litigate this will be in the primary, right?
Why is that the only place to litigate it? Especially given that the primaries are an absolute joke. But apart from that, why shouldn't this be litigated all the fucking time?
We didn't get to have one, regrettably, in 2024.
Not in 2024. And I do think it's reprehensible that Biden did not drop out sooner.
I mean, he really should not have. It was ridiculous for him to run a first time, let alone a second.
And there are people who, I have to say, would argue that, I know I've heard you and Joshua Citarella recently seem to agree that 2020 was a fair race, and that...
Which is a joke.
The rigging that happened in 2016 of the Bernie campaign was overstated.
Which is wild, because here's the thing. Yeah, there was all sorts of dodgy shit that went on in 2016. And actually, this was something the Vanguard dudes were talking about, too. And they also acted as if, 2020 was more or less a fair situation, but 2016 was fucked up. And 2016 had all sorts of fucked up things going on. But 2024? Like, if you didn't have all these candidates just get to drop out and throw their votes to Biden, who nobody was backing, Biden would not have gotten the nomination. Bernie Sanders was on top by a convincing margin. Like, they had to combine their votes in order to get Biden over the line to be even slightly above Sanders. The manipulations were different, and the thing is, it is true, this is all within the rules, but that's why this is a fucking joke. This is why the fact that you can do this and it's within the rules is fucked up, actually.
But it's worth noting. Yeah, it's worth noting that people feel very differently, and even centrists like Jake Tapper and his book
Centrist is really putting it mildly.
Thompson readily acknowledge that 2016 was rigged, that there was a call that went out that had all the candidates drop out after Biden had declined.
And Donna Brazile in her book actually talks about how she found out, like, she didn't, despite her position within the DNC, she did not know this in the first place, but she discovered that actually Clinton had made deals with the Democratic Party so that she had full control over the party from the very beginning, before she had the nomination, throughout the entire... So she was controlling the fucking primary. Which is just wild. That was Donna Brazile, who also got caught giving, during the Clinton-Sanders debate, she got caught giving Clinton a list of questions in advance that were going to be asked. So, but she actually in her book said that it was how ridiculous this was, and the fact that she, in her position, was completely left out of the loop on such a basic question as who is controlling this organization. That is wild.
To win the first 4 contests and circle the wagons around South Carolina. That, of course, there was, $70 million of free media that Biden got after winning South Carolina. That they then changed the order of the primary contest so that a pro-Biden state could go early enough so that they wouldn't have to do quite the same level of machination. But that again...
Yeah, I mean, and there were also things like actually penalizing states that were delaying their primaries because of COVID precautions and things like that. I don't remember exactly what the details were. There were a bunch of fucked up things going on.
Had a mass dropping out and coalescing behind a candidate in order to make it seem as though there's an inevitability there with Joe Biden that there simply wasn't. Sorry, I told kind of 2 stories at the same time with 2016 and 2020. But, that was a 2020 story. And in 2016, It was a much more acute. In the Democratic Party, of course, the DNC admitted that they were entitled to and did, in fact, put their finger on the scale in favor of Hillary Clinton. So
I mean, that is the whole... It is just wild. I just cannot get over the sorts of things you are allowed to do, just openly do, in a presidential primary in the U.S. If you did this shit in pretty much any other country, you would be potentially risking jail time. But here, you just do it.
This begs the question, by some accounts, and I don't expect you to, agree with this, but I do have to just put out there, by some accounts, we haven't had a real primary since 2008.
I see rigging as too strong a word for what you're describing. I think that,
Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit because there was other stuff that she talks about. Relitigating the primaries, I have limited patience for, and this is a 2 hour and 48 minute fucking debate or whatever. So I want to get to other things. Brianna Joy Gray has editors, I'm pretty sure. She has some, she has some backing. She could put chapters in this thing like Cinderella did. I mean, the chapter titles weren't great, but at the very least, you could have some idea and skip to bits if you were looking for specific sections.
Right, but, I mean, this is the thing, this is what's so interesting about that black voter example we gave in the beginning about how black voters didn't get behind Barack Obama until they believed he was electable, which means, that white people would vote for him, which is why the Iowa contest was so important for Obama, right? And similarly, a lot of voters...
I mean, and this is part of what's ridiculous. And God, we're talking about primaries again. I didn't want to talk about primaries the whole fucking time. They're a joke. And she said other fucked up things that I wanted to get to. But, the fact that they don't all happen on the same day, and that they announce the results before all the votes are in, what the fuck is that?
In 2020, I believed enough in the possibility of winning as a progressive within the Democratic Party to, take a pretty significant pay cut and go be a national press secretary and give my life to this. To focus their energy on other strategies to affect change.
Okay, I think this is...
On other clear to the voting public and encourage the public to focus their interdictions, make that really clear to the voting public.
Okay, this looks like we might be getting to something interesting.
The left, heighten the contradictions, make that really clear to the voting public and encourage the public to focus their energy on other strategies to...
Okay, I keep not getting the beginning of this.
Lobby, obvious PACs like APAC, corporate PACs, the energy sector, for working, the interest groups that are at the root of making life bad for working class Americans, meaning the banking industry, the energy sector, calling out corporate PACs, foreign influence PACs like APAC, and all of the rest.
Which is not really a foreign influence pact, because Israel isn't really a foreign country. And one of the things, I have to just point this out every time it comes up, when there is a real conflict between the U.S. and Israel, like, for example, when Israel was trying to sell classified U.S. military tech to China as part of a big deal that would have been really important for them, because it would have given them a new major arms supplier so they wouldn't be so dependent on the U.S. The U.S. completely stopped it, and the lobby, AIPAC and them, they didn't say a thing. Because it's not about Israel, it's about doing propaganda for what the U.S. wants in the Arab-Iranian region.
The health insurance lobby, obviously. Because you advance populist policies that are counter to those interests, right? Like universal health care, ending wars, the Green New Deal, etc. That because those interests are so embedded in the Democratic Party as a corporate party, they will stop at nothing to stop you. I think that is very difficult to argue with. Is it possible that one might be successful despite those efforts? I think it's possible.
I don't.
But I think that it's frankly so unlikely that we have to, as the left...
Which I would... we is not the right pronoun there.
Heighten the contradictions, make that really clear to the voting public, and encourage the public to focus their energy on other strategies to affect change.
I mean, I will say, hey, Tomas. Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. I'm very interested in the answer to it, because it is, I mean, I would say, like, incontrovertibly what needs to happen. Though her definition of the left includes working with Nazis, so, yeah, I mean, I think we would have some differences on implementation.
Okay, I think this is where this is where the real disagreement begins.
Sure, let's get into it.
Right, like I think.
Yeah, let's finally get into it, because
I think that. I guess what I sort of don't understand about your position is I don't understand what is like the theory of change here and on.
Like, okay, what's wild to me here is, yeah, I mean, reasonable question, but the thing is, Natalie's been telling us for like 23 minutes at this point that she doesn't have a theory of change. In fact, she's very clearly said that whether she even feels change is a good idea depends entirely on how primaries come out, as far as she's concerned. I mean, it was a really ridiculous take. So, okay, so what the hell's her theory of change, actually?
Like, what time frame do you imagine this happening? Because I guess the way I see it is that the consequences of Donald Trump winning have been so dire that it's like very difficult for me to take seriously the suggestion that, like, well, it's a correct, it's the idea that we should have diverted all energy away from Kamala Harris to focus on some kind of more revolutionary long-term change. It's like, well,
I mean, if we had been spending the past, like, say, 6 years organizing anti-ICE resistance against all of the fucking mass deportation machine, not just the setting that it's on when Trump is doing it, and it's out there in the open and being publicly announced, then actually we would be in a better situation now. If like liberals had not decided to sort of rebrunch and just pretend that the concentration camps had disappeared and that there weren't mass deportations going on and all that shit, and if people had continued to resist on the same level that they already were under Trump the first term, we would be better off now. That's not in any way, I should be clear, to take away at all from the amazing resistance we're seeing in places like LA and the Twin Cities and a number of other places. But like, if people had taken that approach even if they took like 5 minutes out of their day and went and like voted for somebody at some point, we would just undeniably be better off because we would have a better defense mechanism against all this shit.
Isn't there some way that we can, like, I don't know, both elect a plausible center-left candidate and also...
We define what does plausible mean, and also what does center-left mean, because...
a longer-term, more progressive strategy, considering, like, stuff like, you know, allowing Elon Musk to come in and destroy USAID, and which...
Like, okay... That is such a wild thing to lead with. Out of all the things.
Just probably killing hundreds of thousands of people, and like the Supreme Court that's overturned Roe v. Wade and is gutting voting rights, and all these like fairly difficult to reverse, like catastrophic.
Well, actually, a lot of these things, if there had been any effort to introduce just fairly basic reforms in Congress by Democrats when they've had supermajorities, a lot of this shit could not possibly have would not be anywhere near as bad. Like, if abortion rights were codified at the federal level, hello, Sophic Manatee, we're watching another Natalie Wynn crash out. If, you know, you had an LGBT civil rights law, like we almost had nearly 20 years ago, until the Democrats themselves fucking killed it. If we'd repealed the Patriot Act and gotten rid of ICE and things like that, then this situation would not be anywhere near as dangerous. Instead, what's happened is that more and more powers keep on getting just accumulated in the White House, and nothing is being done to put a check on any of this stuff that is at all durable. And then we're supposed to act like fucking surprised Pikachu when it turns out that when you give the president powers, that when somebody like Trump gets in, he uses them.
Consequences, like, that is like a fairly massive short and medium term sacrifice for a potential maybe long term.
Well, why are we assuming that it's long term? Like, she said other means, you know, like other means of change, pursuing other methods. She didn't say what that means. I'm not going to put words in her mouth because I have absolutely no idea. I just know that she considers working with Nazis to be an acceptable thing. So I'm not, far be it for me to assume that she's going to say something based there. But that doesn't automatically mean long term. Hello, Princess M3 M3 whenever I see W's like that, I read them Welshly. Oh, are these friends of yours? Hello, Princess. How are you doing? I love seeing new people. Since we've got some new people here, I just want to introduce... I'm going to drop a couple of links in chat. Because right now, amongst other things, I have some gift subs to give away to my Patreon that give you access to the Punto Final podcast. I've also got some projects and stuff I'd like to share some links with about. So check that stuff out in chat. There's also a link in here for their, like, 18, I think, still gift subs. A friend of mine accidentally bought 20 gift subs for 1 month at the $10 tier on my Patreon, and so anyone who wants them can just click on that link. So, yeah. Just thought I'd drop those in there. And let me also give the Discord link, since... just so that is also available. Oh, okay. Oh, that isn't part... That is some bullshit that YouTube does. Okay. Yeah, I should have guessed that. Hang on. Oh, thank you. And here's the Discord link for anyone who wants to join there and hasn't already. Thank you for saying so, Princess.
Benefit.
Well,
And
yeah, go ahead.
maybe, I guess I would maybe need to hear you explain what you think is the theory of long-term change here. Like,
yeah, she's throwing the word long-term in there. Nobody was saying long-term until she started throwing that in there.
Comes from,
like, I would not call what's going on, the level of like dual power building that we saw particularly in the Twin Cities, but certainly not just there, in response to ice terror. I would not really call that a long-term thing. That's something that actually showed up. It was sort of prefigured during the uprising in 2020. So it does have some background and like responses to murders by cops and stuff like that, certainly. But it came together very quickly and very effectively. I would not immediately, this idea that anything that isn't electoralism is automatically very long term is an assumption that requires pushback.
voting third party, for example.
Well, that isn't even long term, that's just a joke. Like the entire electoral system de facto bans opposition parties. There is simply no reason to do that, and it is a big part of why, trying to force change through the electoral system is just an absolute non-starter.
Two things. One, that I and third-party voters did not cause Trump to win the first time or the second time, right? There were more Trump voters, as you know. Okay. Two, I would say I'm not, while I might believe, frankly, somewhat pessimistically, that but for things getting worse and having a sort of an accelerationist bent, people are not going to wake up and make things better. I am not, in fact, an accelerationist because I wouldn't actively try to make things worse.
And when you talk about acceleration, this is often an accusation that is thrown at people who criticize the Democrats, but if anyone is doing accelerationism, it's these people who are like, I got an idea. Why don't we give Trump the power to censor the internet? That won't bite us in the ass. How about let's just keep exponentially just having the fucking ICE budget grow at a geometric rate? There's no way that's going to be bad. Like, if anyone's doing accelerationism, it's them. I mean, the accusation that you often hear lobbed at leftists is that, that we supposedly think, after Trump it's our turn, and so therefore, supposedly we don't give a fuck, we want it to get bad because then we're going to win. But that's not us. We're not, I would not say that is actually a position I've even really heard expressed amongst leftists for the most part, certainly in the places that I am. But it does seem to be the operative position of Democrats.
And it wasn't me arguing that Donald Trump should win over Kamala Harris. My argument was that Kamala Harris is absolutely going to lose if she declines to move on Gaza. And we were right about that, right?
Do you think that Gaza is the issue that cost her the election?
I mean, the polling very strongly indicates it. And in fact, the Democrats themselves seem to have realized it, because if you go back to February 2024, there's suddenly a huge shift. Like, they pushed in a new, urgent software patch in everybody's messaging, and they went from saying no ceasefire, just a humanitarian pause, to saying we need to have a ceasefire, and that's why we're going to have a long, drawn-out negotiating process that is normally associated with a full-blown peace treaty just to get a fucking ceasefire. So very clearly they had noticed that this was, what they were doing was just pulling like shit. And so they were scrambling to figure out what message they could use that would introduce a certain amount of confusion so that it wouldn't completely kill their chances.
I think it's been pretty proven out by the data. So what we have is a number of studies, including a study by IMEU, that polls Biden 2020 voters as to why they didn't vote for Kamala Harris in 2024, right? Like, what makes up that deficit that made him win and her lose? And the number one issue is Gaza. The number one issue. Now, so it's not the majority, it's not above 50% of people, right? But of all of the issues listed at 20 27% or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, and when you break it down and look at, like, there's polling that looks specifically at decisive states like Michigan, and in those states, even before the election, there was polling that said if the Democrats didn't, like, change their position on the genocide, this is going to cost them, you know, certainly Michigan, and I think there were a couple of other states as well, that were really up, you know, yeah, humanitarian pause, you know, a snack before dying. That was just wild, and everybody went with it. Like, I mean, there was an interview early on, where Bernie Sanders was talking, well, you can't possibly have a ceasefire with people like Hamas, and I was like, really? There have been ceasefires with Hamas quite a few times, actually, already, and the thing is that, unlike Israel, Hamas actually abides by ceasefires, so it seems like, actually, you can do it.
29%, it was close to 30%, was Gaza. So there were a lot of different things, right? The short primary, Biden's senility, the sense that they were, you know, dishonest and hiding that from us as a public, the lack of a primary, all of these things. But when you saw how many voters, particularly in swing states like Michigan, were openly saying, we will vote for you. The uncommitted movement, remember, wasn't a we're not going to vote for you movement. It was a we're holding our votes hostage in exchange for this policy concession.
Yeah, I mean, and this is part of when you have, like, people who were completely silent or were openly pro-Israel through the height of the genocide in 23-24, saying, well, where are all the protests? Why isn't anyone protesting on campus? And one of the ridiculous parts of it, there's so many ridiculous aspects, but one of them is that a big part of the movement in 2024 was specifically, the idea was to show Harris and the Democrats that if they wanted to get elected, they were going to need to change their position and stop doing genocide. They thought, naively, I mean, that if, you know, the Democrats saw that genocide would cost them the election, which they were saying was such an important election that they couldn't possibly lose it, that they would change their position and, you know, stop committing genocide. And a lot of people who were quite cynical, are, you know, absolutely not optimists when it comes to the Democrats. People thought there might be something in that, precisely because like, Israel's massacres in Gaza have previously been timed along the U.S. electoral calendar. That is not an unusual thing for, you know, for a massacre in Gaza to end just before a major vote is going to happen in the U.S. Hello, old Al Houghton.
Which, frankly, would make you more electable to the broader public because nobody supported at that stage. Very few people. The polls were already overwhelmingly in favor of ending support for Netanyahu's government. And the choice was made by the Democratic Party, not people like me, to choose an alliance with Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel and its genocide over winning an election. And Donald Trump, who also obviously is a genocidal candidate, at least had the sort of political savvy, to try to blur the lines and lie to the public about being a quote-unquote anti-war public.
Yeah, although on the specific subject of Gaza, he did not, like, contrary to a lot of bullshit you hear from Blue MAGA these days, I mean, what he was saying, the words he used was finish the job. But the thing is, that does not hurt him with his supporters for the most part. It certainly didn't back then. It still doesn't hurt him that much with his core supporters, because the people who actually support him, who like Trump for Trump, are genocidal fucks.
And if you ask a lot of voters, they'll say, I know that Trump was lying to me. I know he wasn't anti-war, but at least it wasn't as in my face as someone like Kamala Harris saying we're going to have the most lethal army and we're not going to break from Benjamin Netanyahu and I'm not going to break from Biden and his policy.
Also, I mean, it would have been easier to sustain that belief in 2024 than it is now, because at the very least, you could say he did not actually start any new wars. He continued all of the existing ones and did all sorts of war crimes in that context. But he wasn't but he did not spend his administration spoiling to. I mean, he did threaten to invade Venezuela, thinking about it, so there was that. But for the most part, that was not the focus of what he was doing. He was just continuing existing war crimes for the most part. So somebody coming off of that experience could potentially say, well, he might be less belligerent, but he wasn't really less. If anything, he was less belligerent then than he is now. But, I mean, he was less a lot of things then than he is now.
So I guess I think that I sort of don't really see it as a very strong message that has been sent to the Democrats that they lost this election, considering that Donald Trump won, a candidate who is more unconditionally fanatical in his allegiance to Israel.
Except that Israel has actually been reined in to a certain extent since 2025. But, see, here is just another one of these category errors. Because if you act as if as if the people, the roughly 1/3 of the population, often the poorest 1/3 of the electorate, do not exist, and you just pretend it's a complete binary thing where somebody is either voting for Trump or they're voting for Biden, and voting for Democrats, so they're voting for Republicans, and Democrats are competing with Republicans for votes. What she's saying sounds like it makes sense, but that's not what the competition is. The people who vote for Republicans basically will never vote for Democrats. The people who vote for Democrats will basically never vote for Republicans. The reality is that what Democrats are competing with is abstention. The competition is whether they offer enough to get people who will only ever vote for them when they vote to actually go out and vote. And if they don't provide enough incentive to do that in terms of doing things that would improve their lives, then that doesn't happen. You have two more or less discrete voting bases in this country.
Right, and who is even more, who has, gone...
Actually, not 70 years. The special relationship, as it's called, actually dates back to 1967. Before that, the U.S. actually was very ambivalent in their policy towards Israel. In fact, they had a very specific policy of not being a major supplier of arms for Israel until after 67, because Israel's victory in the June 1967 war over Nasserism led the U.S. foreign policy establishment to totally reevaluate. I doubt that anyone seriously thought Trump was the more anti-Israeli candidate, because every time he talked about it, he was talking about how he would finish the job, how, Biden is Hamas. He was very explicitly pro-genocide. Nobody seriously had any belief that he was going to be anything other than a continuation of the genocide.
Further than the Democrats, who has banned all funding for UN aid and relief to Palestinian refugees, and who
that actually started under Biden, as it happens.
Threatening to deport people.
Well, Biden did that.
Yeah, Biden did that too.
Biden did what?
Both of those things. Literally both of those things that she just listed started under Biden.
Biden cut UNRWA funding. That happened under Biden in spring of 2020.
Yeah, they started this whole smear campaign claiming that out of 30,000 UNRWA employees in Gaza, 12 of them were Hamas. No evidence was ever presented. The people were immediately suspended, pending an inquiry, which revealed no evidence, because no evidence was ever provided. And the U.S. and much of Western Europe immediately cut off the funding to the absolute lifeline for millions of Palestinians. And that funding has never really been restored.
Right? Israel claimed that there were 4 Hamas
12
terrorists in UNRWA, and as a consequence, all UNRWA funding was cut.
I mean, it is stopped, not just cut, not decreased. It was stopped. It was the U.S. and Western Europe.
And that's when the humanitarian crisis really amplified.
And now I'm curious about Old Owl Hooten's Twitch bio.
Opposed to, the starvation, the what do you call it, collective punishment really amplified, right? So I take your point.
That's a factual question. I'll have to look.
Wait, she'll have to look it up. Like, did you not think that this might come up? This is really, I mean, what she's saying is true, except that the number was 12, not 4. And
I'm pretty confident about that because
she's right.
Having to report on this on a daily basis on Rising before, to be clear, I was fired because of that exact kind of reporting, right? Reporting on the facts of what was happening in America's lockstep and enabling of Israel's genocide. But the bigger point I would say is this: I can readily concede that there are many ways in which Trump is worse than Biden. Obviously,
I mean, extremely obviously. Although interestingly, actually, what's going on in Gaza right now is not really an example of it. I mean, there's no, tomorrow is promised to no one, but in terms of the amount of aid being allowed in and the number of people getting killed there, it has gone down substantially. And it has not, there are constant threats that the killing will resume at the level of the murder and mayhem of 2023, 2024. Increasingly. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying that this is actually something that is in any way durable or can be banked on in any way. And this current situation is still fucking genocidal. But actually, the amount of killing that's going on and the amount of aid being allowed in, have respectively gone down and up since 2025. Which is a big part of why the resistance in Gaza has not been keen to resume fighting.
And that Republicans generally are worse than Democrats.
So there are tons of things on which he is both worse than himself, 4 years, not 4 years ago now, a decade ago, versus people who... and worse than what had preceded him, but this is actually not an example. Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Old Owl Hooten. And the thing is that UNRWA really is aid. USAID is, to a great extent, a blackmail operation. It is very specifically geared towards subsidizing U.S. exports and preventing these countries developing their own capabilities so that they maintain a certain level of dependency, and the U.S. can then threaten to yank it in order to get concessions on things like, resource extraction or democracy prevention.
The question, people in my who share my politics have the feeling that one party being worse than the other is an insufficient reason to vote for the lesser of two evils.
And it doesn't even... This is well beyond just, people of a specific political commitment. If you look at the situation of just poor people in this country, you look at the 1/3 of the population who is least likely to vote, because voting actually tends to be a somewhat privileged activity. Voters have a higher average, a higher median income than non-voters. Yeah, quite right, Old Owl Hooten. And within that, then, Republican voters are way better off economically than people who vote for the Democrats. But if you look at the people who largely don't vote, it isn't that they're very politically organized in any way. If they were, actually, things would be very different, because we do know a fair bit about where they stand on things. It's more that they have actually seen from their lives that no matter who they vote for, no matter who gets elected, they're still fucking poor. And in fact, things keep getting worse for them.
When there is enormous latitude for the better party to simply stop being evil. And that the big trick of liberalism is convincing folks that you have to be at least a little bit evil in order to win. Even when
Well, I mean, I think that's just part of the issue is just that capitalism exists, and within capitalism, there's a certain baseline level of just fucked up shit that is necessary to the functioning of the system, and as long as you're not challenging that, and of course, like Sanders, which is her big like political moment, never seriously challenged it. As long as you're not challenging that, there's always going to be some deeply fucked up and potentially planet-killing stuff going on, because the system runs on it.
Opposite is true. Even when supporting Medicare for all makes you more electable, even when supporting Palestinian rights makes you more electable, Democrats are making choices not, in fact, based on electability, but based on what their corporate donor base wants them to do. And if we ever want both parties to stop slipping more and more in that direction, and for there to be any red lines in the sand, even over something as cataclysmic as a genocide, somebody has to say, you have to earn my vote at some point in this.
Yeah, except very clearly, see, that was a reasonable position to take in 2024. I mean reasonable in the sense that I could see somebody understanding it. But what we saw in 2024 is that it doesn't fucking matter. Saying you have to earn my vote does not change behavior. Because they don't give a fuck. And you just have to accept that they don't give a fuck. You know, you can say, you know, I won't vote for you if you don't do one or other just active basic human decency that happens to be extremely popular. They don't give a fuck. They won't do it. They, you know, so we have to actually take that on board and act accordingly. Because if just threatening not to vote for them unless they do the right thing it doesn't actually impress them, and it clearly does not, because otherwise, you know, 2024 would have come out very differently, then we just have to not base our organizing around, like, the election cycle and hoping to convince people to earn our vote or whatever. And we just have to actually just start doing the thing. You know, doing things like creating community resistance to ICE in the Twin Cities, like shutting down the genocidal supply chain, like, you know, building these building these networks of mutual aid and mutual defense that allow us to weather storms like the one we're in right now. Yeah. At a certain point, you have to just realize they don't give a fuck, and that therefore, trying to, like, holding your vote hostage, like, that's like sitting there, that's like trying to negotiate as the Palestinian resistance with, you know, with a bunch of Israeli POWs. Israel doesn't give a fuck. Israel bombed them. Israel killed more of them than anyone else. Israel was just, like, seriously just bombing the places where there was any belief that there might be captive Israelis in Gaza. So, obviously, those are not good bargaining chips. So you gotta do it differently. Maybe the idea isn't to bargain. Maybe the idea is to actually just do the shit and create facts and say, okay, so from now on, ICE doesn't get into our neighborhood, and if they try it, they're gonna get their asses kicked. And how do you like that? And you have to just be ready for the fact that there is going to be a response to that. There is going to be repression, and you just have to be willing to think beyond that and think about what you're going to do about it, and realize that if you don't, then this shit just keeps getting more fucked up, and there will be no way out of it. There is no solution that's going to come from convincing people to care about your vote when they clearly do not. And with that, it is time to wrap up for tonight. Thank you to everyone for joining in, and welcome to Princess and the other new people. Oh, thank you. I was hoping that there might be a link there because I wanted to also see Old Owl Hooten's Twitch bio. Come on, how do I copy this? So thank you for putting that up, River Rune. You're always very helpful. And thank you for the birthday wishes and everything. Do check out those free gift subs. They're just there for the taking. A friend of mine accidentally bought 20 gift subs for $10 at one, $10 for 1 month. And so anyone who wants it, there's no commitment, I should say. If you're worried about that, you don't have to give. It will ask if you want to give details in order to renew automatically, and you can just select the other option and just take the month, and you create an account without payment details, and it just reverts to a free account, next month. So there's no commitment involved in it. It's just a free gift, the courtesy of a good friend who didn't know what it meant when you put, when you bought, when you sent money on a Patreon and clicked gift. So enjoy those and enjoy the next episode of the Punto Final podcast and the new translations. And I look very much forward to seeing you next week on Friday at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I hope to see you soon. And in the